And here we are, driving back from the theater. Just watched Smile. It did not put a smile on my face. Now, there's a lot that I liked about this movie. I'm going to try to get the spoiler-free part out of the way quickly here. This was a jump scare heavy film. Absolutely relied upon your stereotypical tropes. Most of the time I felt myself react in any way to this film, it was because they just played loud noises in my ears. And there were even tricks in the way they cut the film that made it just jump scary. It wasn't scary, it was just loud. They'd have a moment where I trying to avoid spoilers here, but they'd go from something very, very quiet and then cut immediately to traffic, in a loud, busy area. And it wasn't scary at all. It was just loud. And that was a really big issue that I had with the movie. I felt that it was louder than it was scary. Now, I will say, I think that this story has a very cool creepypasta-esque feel to it. This is the kind of story that I have a feeling I'm going to enjoy the lore more than the actual content that gets produced. I think this has a lot of potential, a very cool backstory that's being built here. I don't know that it worked well as a standalone film, but I'm interested enough to see what comes next. So for you spoiler-free folks, before we dive into any actual detail, I would say that I recommend this if you're in the Halloween mood and you're looking for a high creep factor with a couple of scares. Go for it. I would go for it on a discount night. You already know that's what I did. But now it's the time to get into the real movie review. So if you are someone who hasn't seen the movie yet, get out now while the getting is good. So Smile, what we had here was a little story about a psychiatrist, therapist, a doctor, that much is certain, a doctor who lived through some childhood trauma and took it upon herself to help others who had that trauma. Then all of a sudden one day, our beloved protagonist doctor gets a patient that even she can't help, a patient that creepily stares and smiles at her as she, endgames herself in just one of the most brutal and vicious ways you could ever imagine. It's horrific. And, of course, our doctor reacts a certain way. And then that's the whole setup for the premise. And we're not going to go beat by beat, not on this particular episode of reviewing this movie. Now, we will be back later. I will have the crew with me, at least half of the crew. We're going to have Sean and Noah around. We're going to sit around the table and discuss this movie ad nauseum. I'm certain of that, but I will spare you the beat by beat rundown in this particular episode and just tell you this, that the premise of the movie is our doctor protagonist is going through some things, and it's really your psychological thriller, beat by beat. Is any of this happening? Is the doctor just losing her mind? To pull from a more recent film that a lot of you are likely to have seen, it pulled a Joker, and had a lot of scenes go on for quite some time only to reveal that none of that had actually happened and it was all in her head. And they did that time and time and time and time again. And I think that certainly lessened the impact for this viewer. I don't mind those. I'm not one who will instantly say, oh, it was all a dream, fuck you, movie, goodbye. That's not normally my stance on the matter, but when you play that note nearly a dozen times in a 2-hour movie, I start to get frustrated. And that was one of my knocks against this movie. This movie had its notes, and it played its notes, and then it played them again, and it just kind of stuck to the script. It did some cool things. The backstory of these characters, of Rose, the main character, her backstory is very cool. It gave you sort of a Silent Hill feel to it, where every victim has this shared link of, you know, they had some sort of trauma previously in their life, which is what allowed them to be susceptible to the monster. I'm really going to have to dive deeply into this one and maybe even a second viewing, to really look into the monster and see if it makes sense, because the whole thing with the inmate that got out of it by taking someone else's life, that whole thing feels weird. It felt oddly placed. It just felt like they were borrowing from the playbook. Like, this is what you do in these movies. There's someone who's experienced it. There's someone who knows. And of course, she mentally went and took that route, took someone else's life in front of a witness. And as cool as that could have been to explore, I don't know if anyone in the theater actually bought that was happening. Again, because they had done the she daydreams for 5 whole minutes and then you are brought back to reality. They had done that so many times that I don't know that anyone was invested in any scenes by the end. I don't know how you could be. At what point do you not smarten up and say, oh, well, none of this is probably happening? So that's one of those things that when you do the none of this is probably happening, you have to be smart about how you do it and how many times you do it and when you do it. Otherwise, it starts to waver in its effectiveness. You know, you can't water down such techniques. And unfortunately for me, and we're not going to go full spoilers into this because we are approaching our end. We're approaching our destination here. Unfortunately for me, I saw the ending of this movie coming about 2/3 of the way in. We will, of course, go through Kev's notes. I know for some of you that is the absolute highlight of this program, and for some of you, you're probably likely to skip it, and that's quite all right. But for those of you who like it, have no fear. There are plenty of notes to discuss with this movie. In general, I liked it more in concept than I did in practice. The marketing was great. The marketing is what got me there. I did not watch a single preview for this movie. I simply was there because of the great creepy people they hired to sit at baseball and football games. So one of the notes that I had that are sticking out into my mind as we wrap this up is that this movie was so much sizzle and not a lot of steak. Great cinematography. I really enjoyed what they did with the soundtrack. Some of the stuff is horror tropes that you're used to, but done in a cool and unique way. I really appreciate what they did to the audio, because I really think that carried this movie. The aesthetic carried the movie. You don't even see the smiley folks that often. It's so much of just an ambiance in a setting of creepiness and horror. And for that, the director, the cinematographer, of course, the editors, I mean, these guys all deserve just a ton of credit. And overall, with the monster that they've created here, I am so intrigued that I would be interested, I would be invested in following this franchise. But as the movie on its own, it felt very flat at the end. Maybe if you're someone who didn't see it coming from a mile away, you felt like, oh man, what a twist ending. But to me, it seemed not at all like a twist. It felt very set up, very obvious what was going to happen. And if you know the current climate of movie production, you probably expected this movie to end in a way that would set up a sequel. So I can't see how you would be surprised by how this ended. But of course, it ends on a cliffhanger, setting up a second movie. But unlike most, or I guess at least unlike, I don't know, it's about a split bag. This had the completely bad ending. No, there's no good to come of this at all. They make you maybe think that it would work. Again, there's one point where she thinks she's won. I'm going to get into it. Okay, by the way, I'm parked out in front of my house, so if I get arrested, this will be my evidence. The final scene really pissed me off in a sense that she showed up with the intent of, if no one's there to witness my death, this demon can't pass on. Of course, she picked the stupidest place in the world she could go to, which was her childhood home. One of, I can only guess, what would be like a handful of places that her ex-boyfriend cop could think to possibly look for her. Oh, she's gone off the grid. She's not answering her phone. She wants to be alone and deal with this trauma. I can't imagine what one of the places she might go to would be. I guess I'll start with places of, childhood significance or whatever, her own little historically important areas. So of course she goes to the one place where she might be found, which is her childhood home. And then when she thinks she's defeated this demon, which I don't know why she thought it was as easy as just lighting it on fire, when she knows 30 seconds before she lit the thing on fire, she admitted that it was in her mind. That's actually how she defeated it. The monster says, you can't run from what's in your mind. And then she says, well, you're in my mind too, and you can't run, so I lit you on fire. And now I'm going to let myself believe that I'm running away and going back to my ex-boyfriend, who's way nicer than A-Train, and he understands me, and he's got a nice pirate goatee, and he'll let me stay the night, and we're going to have this happy ending. Oh, wait, no, I'm still standing out in front of my mom's house. And oh, hunky ex-boyfriend did find me, and now I'm going to try to run away from him. And of course, he breaks in just in time to witness the end gaming of our main character Rose. So it ends on a complete bad note. I didn't stick around for an after credit, so if there was an after credit, that will be addressed in our next episode. But until then, not so bad. I look forward to digesting this a bit more, especially after watching Barbarian last week, and once that one sat for a couple of days, I enjoyed it a little bit more. I'm not sure that will be the case here, but if this was a YouTube series, if this were analog horror, or I can get invested in the story that is being built behind this movie. So as a standalone movie, yes, I'm a little disappointed, but I am pretty amped about just new IPs coming into the horror genre. And this did kind of feel a little It Follows-y, but you know what? I'm not out here looking for the most unique and creative, never been done before idea. Take something that's been done, make it your own, make it neat. I have a strong feeling that if these filmmakers are truly inspired and passionate about this story, that this first film will make enough money to get them a real budget for film 2. And I truly believe this will be one of the instances in Hollywood where the sequel will actually be better than the original. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, those movies stick out. And the way this has set up, that there's so much that's cool here that's yet to be explored, that I think that there's a lot of potential for this to get better as it goes. But as a movie on its own, it was just kind of cool. I look forward to the alleged end of the Michael Myers saga in a couple of days, but we are only halfway to Halloween, baby. So many more spectacular spooks coming your way, and I'll be here to review at least some of them. So make sure you've liked and subscribed. Can I go inside now? I think I'm gonna go do normal person things for a while. All right, see you later.